Okay, we are at Kafatek, and let's kind of talk a little bit about flat and conicals. Flats and conicals. Everybody always asks the question, do I buy the flat burr grinder, or do I buy the conical burr grinder? And this is more of like a broader level video where we're talking about these from like a high level, and we'll kind of have Denis go, nerd out and talk about, very specific things with design. And then we can also talk about, if you were looking at picking up a monolith, why should you get the flat and why should you get the conical? Because you have different grinders. But otherwise, let's kind of start with the broader overview of flat versus conicals. Obviously, first of all, these burrs look very different.
Very different.
So with a flat burr, you have flat cutting surfaces, two discs that are flat, and then with a conical, you have
the cone.
Yes.
And then you have the outer burr. And the coffee pretty much flows from top to bottom. Usually the cone will spin, but there are designs where the outer burr spins instead and the cone is stationary.
Okay.
And that's pretty much, on the surface of it, that's it.
And I know for many, many years, a lot of people always talk about if you're doing light roast and you're doing pour over, get flats. And if you're doing dark roast and espresso, get conicals.
Yes.
But I think nowadays, we have found many different burr designs that can kind of do the opposites, right? You have conicals that can do light roast really well. You have flats that can do dark roast really well. So it's kind of like now it's like, okay, well, what are the actual differences if you can design burrs to do what things are, do what it's not intended to do, right? For example. So I guess what's kind of your take on that? Like, just why would somebody pick a flat versus a conical?
Yeah, for me, like people ask me that, and like the first thing I say, if you are into the light roasted coffee, as espresso, get the max, get the flat burrs.
Yeah.
And reason being the clarity, you're gonna have a lot of clarity, you're gonna have a great extractions because these, the shurikens, they extract really, really well. The conicals, especially the shurikens, they extract very well too, but the flavors I feel are more blended. So, there are peaks, the flavors are maybe on the peaks, I would say sharper tasting as opposed to like a smoother flavors on the flats. And then the conicals will not be as clear as the flat burrs.
Yeah. So those are like the general differences.
Yeah.
Now let's kind of get a little more specific, right? Because basically the first kind of thing I think we could talk about is surface area or burr size differences between conicals. Because for example, you can have big conicals today, so like 71 millimeter conicals. These are 98 flats here. How is surface area measured, or like how is size like dictated with some of these burrs nowadays?
It's got like the one of the things that it does is a speed, like how fast they grind. And then, but that's controlled by many factors, like how many teeth does the burr has. And like the more teeth, the faster it's gonna grind, then how aggressive these teeth are. So I think the time the coffee spends in this conical burr largely affects that particle size distribution of the conical burr. And I think because the coffee kind of rolls over all around before exiting, so the more it goes around and around before getting out of the burr, the more fines you will get. And it's, that's different from the flat burr because the coffee usually will go faster through these.
This is where burr design, all this, it's like incredibly convoluted, right?
Yeah.
Like, how fast does the coffee go in? How fast does it spend in here? And then how fast does it go out of here? And how long does it take to go out of there?
Yep.
Right?
And then the surface finish on top.
Oh, and then like how
smooth
the surface. So there are a lot of very specific things to these. With something like conicals, making small versus large conicals, what are the differences there? Like, why do you end up with 71 millimeter versus, say, 68 or 48 or 38?
Yeah, it's the same, like, kind of thinking that we had in coffee community years ago, probably from the Titan project, like a larger burr, better taste. So that's, I was like, okay, I'm making a large burr. Like a larger burr. And I think it does taste a little better. It's like a larger sweet spot, as you say. tastes better, easier to use. Like the conical burr grinders are easier to use.
Oh yeah, when they're bigger. Yeah.
Yes, in the terms of the puck preparation. Like you don't have to do, like you can usually skip the WDT even with the conical burrs. You can just shake it and tamp it and it's good to go.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's much easier to use, while the flat burrs are a little bit harder. And I think that comes down to that fines, like how many fines is in the, you know, ground coffee.
Or when you were designing the Shura cones and Shurikens, was it harder to design for conical or flat? Like what are
Flat was much harder.
Flat, okay. Why is that?
It's hard to say. I don't know. Like these ones kind of went easier than this. Like, you know, but that may be because I did these first. You know.
So you went through your hundreds of iterations.
Yes, and then I was like, okay, now I know what I want and I know how to get there. You know, so I know, okay, I need these surfaces smooth. I want to polish that. You know, I want to have my curved surfaces here. You know, stuff like that. So that might be the reason that went faster.
I see.
But like the conicals, the shurikens even have much more clarity than the traditional conicals.
Right, yeah, and that's what's the interesting thing is, like, you know, we were mentioning this at the beginning of the video. This is my example of you can take this thing that is not actually, you know, conicals, oh, they're not good for light roast, but then you take something like Shurikens and you're like, oh, wait, actually these work really well for light roast. You know, you can pull fast flowing turbos and you can do pour over with these and it'll taste great. But it's just kind of interesting. It's like, it's just like, does it matter? And nowadays, right? Is like, does the flat versus conical debate even matter nowadays, right? Like my take is it's less so of a thing now.
Yeah, the gap narrowed.
Yeah, the gap is very narrow. Like at the end of the day, you can make really great coffee out of both, at least at this level, right? When we're talking like these types of burrs, right? Really the biggest difference today still is something like workflow. Is that like, so why do these generate so much more static? Or like flats seem to generate so much more static.
Much more.
Okay.
I think so. I think so too. It's just how coffee rubs. Like, you know, the rubbing action of the coffee as it goes out, you know.
Creates more static.
It just creates more static.
I see.
And I think in the conicals you get, and like we know, like if you have that coffee that is static, if you just stir it, you are helping dissipate that. So in a way, as the coffee spends time in this conical burr, it's getting
stirred.
It's getting stirred inside too. I mean, it happens here too, but not to the same extent as in the conical burr, I think.
Yeah. So it's just like, you know, nowadays, I'm like, I don't know anymore. I can make great coffee on flats. I can make great coffee on conicals. I do think maybe it might just be placebo now for me. I'm like, oh, if I'm brewing light roast, I need to use a flat. Otherwise it won't taste as good.
That's what I do. That's what I do. Like if I'm using, but on the flip note, if I'm using dark roast, I want to use conical.
I mean, you can observe this too. If you did PSDs and if you look at the coffee, even with something like very, very high-end coffee grinders like Monolith Conical and Flat Max, you get them side by side and you grind, you will see differences between the two, even though they both are fantastic and you can push them in either direction, right? So there is still a flavor profile difference, but is it as big as, you know, people make it out to be? Nowadays, I don't think as much.
Yeah, no, I think like, you know, if you were not trying them side by side, like, I don't know, like, could you be able to pick the difference? Like if you were at your friend's house and you are trying the conical and then you come back home and you're trying the Flat Max.
Yeah, you're like, I don't know.
I don't know if you're going to be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, because like,
it's hard.
I agree too, because like nowadays, at least even from a coffee perspective, like the coffees have gotten so much better.
Yeah,
People are using really good water. It's like you're gonna get great results from either of them, even though there are physical differences with how your coffee is being ground, and there is a visual difference and measurable difference between fines and all that.
And even an extraction, like that's another interesting thing. Like we can easily get like 26, 27 extraction yields out of the 98s.
Yeah.
But that's much harder to get with a conical burr.
Yeah. And then even if you can extract this, it doesn't necessarily taste good. Right?
No, the extraction, it doesn't matter.
We're trying to clarify things, but we may have made them more convoluted for you.
Probably.
No. But that's the thing is like, you know, when you're trying to buy these grinders in today's landscape, I think, you know, from as long as they're good, right? Like it's hard to go wrong, right? I think really what you should evaluate is like the cost, right? Like I mean, my understanding is it more expensive to produce flats than conicals, or
Yes, more steps.
more steps? Yeah.
More
so
steps.
so like that's why you generally see the flat burr grinders
Yep.
cost more money
Yep.
because there's more work and
More
cost,
work in the burr,
right?
yep.
To do that, and then from there it's like if money is of no constraint, then pick which one you like the most,
Yeah.
right? But that's my take too. Is like nowadays today the gap is so close between these two. Unless you are going for very, very specific things like pushing for the maximum extraction.
Yep. Or if you are into dark roast,
Yeah.
then I would say get a conical. There is no reason to get a max.
Yeah. Well, because on the conical, more fines,
Yeah.
chocolatier shots,
Yes.
right? But you probably don't want that maximum clarity, 27% extraction yield dark roast.
No.
Right?
No, it doesn't taste good.
Yeah. I just want to talk about this, right? Like conical versus flat, but from somebody who actually makes these all day,
Yeah.
right? Is there
Yeah.
anything else you want to add?
Well, the most important thing, like on any of these burrs, then pretty much comes down to the precision of the grinder. And that is important because, like on the flat burrs, to control the grind size, it's pretty much how these burrs come close together.
Right.
That controls the size. And when you turn the funnel, you are actually spreading them further apart or bringing them closer together. So then that's where the precision comes in. Like if they are not coming together perfectly parallel, then you're going to have a coarse grind coming out of here and fine grind coming out of here.
Yeah.
Not a good idea.
Yeah, so that's the other thing too is with the flats, alignment is something that
Yes,
matters.
it's got to be parallel.
Yeah.
But on the conical, that's not that important. On the conical, what's important is how concentric these two go together.
I see.
So like if they are a little bit tough like this, it's not going to be the end of the world. Like not on the flats. On the flats, 50 microns is noticeable. On the conicals, I don't think 50 microns will do much, but it will if it's a concentric
I see.
alignment. So like here, you are bringing them closer together like this, but if you are off like this, then you suddenly have
Yeah, you have different sizes
Yep.
going through.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the thing is like, a lot of what we are discussing here is not necessarily exactly things related to flavor profile, right?
Yeah.
It's more like, well, if you own one of these, alignment matters. The workflow is going to be different. But
Yeah.
flavor profiles nowadays, they're getting pretty close
It's
together.
very close, yeah.
And in addition from that, right, like the only thing that I think you should be concerned about is, and this is more so for flat burrs, is like, you can buy these flats and a lot of these flat burrs, you can stick them in all these different grinders. But you have to then look at, the tolerances, right? Like the burr carrier, how's the alignment, right? Because this is where you need to then worry more about, okay, well, maybe you're not going to get the best performance out of the burr because of the actual housing
Yeah.
it's in, right?
Yeah.
And then that's like a whole entire other conversation. But that's the thing with these flats is just be aware of that, right?
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, like I just wanted to have this quick little discussion on flats versus conicals with Denis. It's just cool to be able to have a discussion on these differences nowadays because I don't really think they're that big anymore.
Yeah, it's not like in the previous versions, like in the old conical burrs, the difference was massive. I think these days like that narrowed down a lot, and I think the biggest difference is actually on the edge, and especially with the dark roasts. That I think is where you're gonna see the biggest difference.
I see.
I don't think not that much in a light roast.
But it's like if you're really pushing it, right?
Yeah.
You want like the maximum extractions. That's where you'll notice it. But also, it's like that is of what we can measure, right? It's still
Yeah.
going to come down to how you taste and
Yes.
what you're into, right? You're going to be able to taste those different. Like I do genuinely think if you have a good flat and a good conical side by side, you should be able to taste those differences.
Yes.
But most people probably just running one grinder. If you only run one grinder, you're probably going to be good either ways
Oh,
if
yeah.
you're getting a higher end flat or a higher
Yes.
end conical in today's landscape, right?
Yeah.
But just wanted to provide a different perspective there.
And it's a journey.
Oh yeah, it's
It's
fun,
a journey.
right? It is.
That's where the fun is.
Yeah.
That's how I started too. It's like you go through the journey of enjoying coffee and discovering things, and it's fun.
Yeah, so that's the thing, getting into the hobby and playing around with the different grinders and different burr sets. Nowadays, it's pretty hard to go wrong if you pick a good manufacturer and good grinder. You pick a good flat conical. They're going to make you great coffee. It's really going to come down to what coffee you're using and also the water. That's just still the end of the day, right? The grinder is a tool for that, but you got to use good water in coffee. That is reality. So yeah, otherwise that is just a quick take on flats versus conicals, some slight difference, high level and some of the closer things. Hope that was helpful. Maybe it made things more confusing, but yeah. Thank you so much for watching.
Yeah.
See you guys later.